10 worst Shark Tank deals. 10. Nightrunner. With a catchy name and a pretty neat product, you would have thought that the deal struck between Robert Herjavec and owners Renata and Doug Storer would have been a real winner. They didn't seem to think so, however, and ended up trashing the deal that they made on air, stating simply that they had decided to go in another direction. Really, they just didn't want to give up any equity, and it seems that they may have just wanted the added publicity of appearing on the show. They really can't expect an investment on Shark Tank without giving up a little something in return, as that's pretty much how these things go. We're sure they'll do okay on their own, but we bet they'll end up kicking themselves eventually for eventually walking away from what was supposed to be a great deal for everyone. 9. Toy Guru. Toy Guru seems to have gotten its inspiration from Netflix.
We did a soft launch with 500 members. It was basically like a test launch.
Deciding that its membership style way of doing business could be applied elsewhere. It's just too bad the market she chose was toys. After an impressive pitch, she ended up walking away after taping was finished up with an easy $200,000 from Kevin O'Leary and Mark Cuban, tanking their investment not long afterwards. The company struggled to get off the ground and ultimately crashed and burned, filing for bankruptcy within a mere year of getting help from the Sharks. To be fair, the idea did sound quite interesting, but we're sure it was just too much to pull off for the team behind it. Maybe one day we'll see a Toy Guru type toy company. As of now, the domain that the company used to be found under is up for sale, and it seems there's a potential void to be filled, assuming someone's able and willing to take on the challenge. A project of that size would require a pretty top-notch team, and it isn't the kind of space that's welcoming to newcomers. In fact, tech can be pretty cutthroat most of the time, and it looks like Toy Guru's team just couldn't keep up. While this was a pretty big loss for both investors, it's by no means the largest sum that they've given to a team that can't manage to pull off a grand scheme, and we're sure it won't be the last. 8. Sweet Balls. Sweet Balls was another $200,000 opportunity for the company's founders, but they just couldn't hack it in the world of business. They ended up playing fast and loose with the terms of their deal.
Category yes. Were any of your other enterprises successful?
They also ended up having a bit of an internal row between the two founders, James McDonald and Cole Egger, with McDonald eventually suing Egger for breach of contract, effectively ending their working relationship. We don't know all the details of how this argument came about, but suffice it to say that it was more than enough to destroy any kind of investment the Sharks offered the guys. Cole later took a restraining order out against his former business partner, suggesting things got pretty heated. Whatever it was all about, $200,000 isn't anything to scoff at, and we're sure that this hurt Mark Cuban, the Shark who ended up coughing up the money, despite it being a relatively small amount for him in the long run, given his net worth. Still, this will be a big lesson in making sure that everyone's cards are on the table and there isn't any animosity between the people running a given company. 7. Cubits. Daymond John was one of the big losers after a company that he decided to back ended up going absolutely nowhere. He offered the man behind Cubits, Mark Burbinger, $90,000 for his business, although that was based on the supposition that Burbinger would land a deal with at least one of 4 major companies that John had in mind. Burbinger accepted the deal and everyone left happy, but Burbinger was unable to land any of the companies as none of them liked what he had to say. It could just be that Burbinger was a shoddy salesperson, but he managed to convince John, which is saying something right off the bat. It could also be that Burbinger just didn't have the drive that it takes to make it as an entrepreneur, and just couldn't make anything stick because of that. Whatever the reason, he ended up gaining zero momentum and missed out on what could have been a successful venture. At the end of the day, a lack of interest from any major toy company is a pretty hard hurdle to get over. 6. You Smell. Shark Tank investor Robert Herjavec and You Smell soap company owner Megan Cummins seem to have left the show seeing eye to eye, but their proposed agreement ended up falling through when they realized they just weren't going to work well together. Cummins later said that she was almost immediately upset about the fact that she went with Herjavec over Mark Cuban as an investor, but that she ended up accepting Herjavec's initial proposal even though Cuban offered to match it because she was just so caught up in the moment. Overexcitement may not have been the only reason that the business venture and partnership between the two didn't work out, but it should be said that Cummins didn't have a pretty solid plan. The pair ended up parting ways relatively amicably, but it's clear that they won't be partnering up at all in the future. We don't know if Cuban would have been a better bet, or if Megan just wasn't up for taking constructive criticism from a heavyweight, but we're sure that she'll end up landing on her feet once she finds an investor that she meshes with. She just won't be doing it on Shark Tank again, as we're sure that Herjavec, for one, isn't her biggest fan. 5. Show no. Shelly Eller and her tile company seemed like a sure thing when she gave her pitch on Shark Tank and was met with a deal from Lori Greiner, who offered to take her under her wing. We don't know what happened once the camera stopped rolling, but Show No ended up going under not too long after the deal was struck. The company had been showing good growth for the past 6 years, but Eller and Greiner just couldn't pull it off in the end. The pair parted ways on bad terms after Greiner moved into greener pastures and left Eller behind. Initially, Eller was upset about being tossed aside so blatantly, but eventually decided that it was a good life lesson and has since applied what she learned from her experience and gotten to the point where she can move on. It seems like the Sharks just aren't for everyone, and some animosity between investors and investees is sure to pop up now and then. But it's tough to see such a good deal on paper go so badly when the ball actually gets rolling. 4. Grinds. Well, this pitch was probably supposed to be a goner right from the get-go. Grinds was pitched as a study aid for college kids and was supposed to be the next big thing. They came packaged in little round tins that looked like something people would get their dip in and were pretty much nothing more than a bunch of prettied up coffee grounds that were supposed to give you a better caffeine rush. The idea, pitched by investors, if you can call them that, Matt Canepa and Pat Pizzette, is pretty ludicrous and gets even more ridiculous when you add in their line of flavors, including cinnamon and mocha. The pair came up with the product when they were students at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and started chewing coffee grounds when they needed extra energy in order to keep up with their studies. Daymond John and Robert Herjavec ended up partnering up to offer the kids $100,000 in exchange for 15% of their company. Say what you will about the Sharks most of the time, but they really dropped the ball on this deal. The company, however, is still doing business, although we doubt just how good sales actually are. The deal, for what it's worth, ended up not coming to fruition, which probably saved the Sharks from making one hell of a foolish deal. 3. Hillbilly. Hillbilly is the name of a clothing company started by Mike Habiticcio and Sean Lees, who also trademarked the name. They appeared on Shark Tank and initially asked for a $50,000 loan, along with 25% equity in their struggling business. When their investor decided to get down to business after accepting, however, it came to light that the two were nothing short of fame-hungry hucksters who only appeared on the show to gain some cheap advertising for their products, which weren't really all that great to begin with. They ended up being kicked to the curb and left to their own devices, which was pretty much selling bad t-shirts out of the back of their truck. In our opinion, people in that kind of position should be looking for all the help they can get, but they let pride get in the way, and it cost them big time. 2. Ruffle butts. When a husband and wife duo strolled in with their big idea and pitched it to investors, they asked for a whopping $600,000 in exchange for 7% equity in their company. They eventually took a deal with Greiner that earned them a $600,000 loan.
Being super cute is top priority.
Not an investment, and 9% of their company. The loan they were given will have to be paid off in a scant 2 years, meaning they really need to kick ass in orders to keep themselves afloat. Mark Cuban decided that he couldn't keep quiet at that point, telling Greiner that this particular deal was the worst one that she had ever offered, backing it up by saying that the company owners would eventually come to regret their decision. We do think that it was a pretty weak deal to take and are sure that the team behind Ruffle Butts will think twice before taking on another investor. The deal was pretty bad, and we're in agreement with Cuban and can't believe they actually took it at all. The show's pitchers, if you will, are usually offered cash investments, not loans, making this just a star-studded trip to the bank for a standard loan, along with a chunk of their company, which is just adding insult to injury. The company's still doing okay, so it seems that they managed to crawl their way out of that debt, but it isn't often that one shark will sound off quite so truthfully on another, and Cuban's outburst really said it all. 1. Body jack. One of the worst Shark Tank deals ever involved a company that manufactured a high-end push-up machine. Unfortunately for Barbara Corcoran and Kevin Harrington, who guest starred as a shark for the episode,
that you try a new machine out, you lose 30 pounds,
got all caught up in the hype and forgot to consider the fact that this was just another piece of workout gear that was nothing more than a fad, the bubble of which popped long before the Shark Tank deal was struck. The body jack offered nothing out of the ordinary, and the company ended up going under for reasons that weren't made clear to the public. We bet that the product just didn't sell, although it could have been any number of factors that led to them going bust. The total amount invested was $180,000. They ended up losing all of that in the long run.
I gotta be 245 or below.
It's 200.
Should come out here. 243! Wow! Yeah!
Corcoran ended up only losing $50,000, but that doesn't make it any easier. Really? She should have known better, later describing the man behind Body Jack as a fast-talking cowboy and quipped that he could have lost about 50 pounds. We say that if the inventor of a product isn't able to get results or even make the effort to try his product out for any period of time, then you've probably thrown your money down on a lemon of an idea.